tone, which was basically like it gives an SG through a wah pedal, and it has a very specific nasally tone that derived from a mid-range boost. So he had that put into his signature model Strat so he could emulate that sound. Active electronics on bass guitars, typically high-pass, low-pass Shelvin filters, some have mid-range boost. Active electronics are something that they've finally been embraced in certain guitar communities. The EMG pickups, are used by some artists, mostly in the heavy metal genre. But bass guitars have been using active electronics for a long time. There were some prominent people using Olympics in the 70s who used a lot of this active filter shaping built into the instrument. Okay, so getting back to stop boxes and pedals. One of the common devices is graphic equalizer. I didn't bring one in today, but you've probably seen them. They have a bunch of sliders, and you draw something that looks kind of like the spectrum you want out. So if you want to boost the bass, you push up the knobs on the left, and if you want to boost the treble, you push up the knobs on the right. And basically what a graphic equalizer is a bunch of filters with fixed center frequency, fixed Q, variant amplitude. And they're usually described as spaced in octaves. So if you look at the frequencies, you'll see like 60, 120, 240, that's an octave. Or you can get half octave or third octave. Usually the rack mount ones can be third octave. And they're typically spaced so that, I believe if you look at the different curves, I looked at this at one point, that this is FC1 and this is FC2, that one of them is 3 dB down, the other one's peak. And that's actually varies based on design, and there's some interesting articles out there discussing that. I don't remember if they're in the references, but look at that. So that's a graphic equalizer. And again, this kind of shows that you've got bandpass filters, you've got a gain that's controlled by the slider, and then they're all summed back together. There's also another type of equalizer, and I think I did bring one in, that's called a parametric equalizer. And what that does is it gives you the ability of controlling not just the frequency, but also the bandwidth, and in some cases, in a fully parametric, the Q as well. Okay?
What is the bandwidth defining Q?
Yeah, you're right. Never mind. Yeah, so I'm sorry. So if it allows you to define the bandwidth, it allows you to define the Q. You're right. So that's a parametric, and then you get a semi-parametric allows you to define the frequency and the amplitude, but it's got a fixed Q. So parametric gives you 3 ways of varying: boost or cut, the gain, the bandwidth, and then the frequency. So this one here is a single band, fully parametric EQ. Whereas often what you find are like a 3-band semi-parametric EQ. They have fixed Qs. I have a Boss bass equalizer pedal on my board that is a 3-band semi-parametric. So it's got 3 concentric knobs. One is the frequency and the other is the level. But there's no way of adjusting the Q. Whereas this gives you the ability to adjust the Q, but it's just 1 band. Okay? So here kind of should, the parametric equalizer is a little, it's harder to operate if you don't understand what it's doing, because you've got this frequency knob, or frequency control that allows it to move. It's not easy to look at and understand what it's doing, like a graphic EQ, right? Graphic EQ really gives you, it looks like the spectrum. But it's powerful because you can use it for certain things, like if you need to boost a frequency but you don't know the frequency, you turn up the boost and you sweep it so you get the right sound. Or if you're getting feedback and you want to cut a frequency, you put it to maximum cut and then you sweep it till that frequency disappears. For feedback cancellation, a parametric equalizer is a very handy tool. So this is an example with noise and the boost. So in this, I think I've got the boost cranked up and I'm just sweeping it through the different bands. So this is the low knob, the mid-range knob, and then the high knob. These are the concentric tops I was talking about. And then this is, that's got the high boost. And then I turn the gain from all positive boost to all cut. And then I sweep backwards. And you can hear it cutting out. You know, so it's not that you would typically use it in this dynamic fashion. This is just a way of illustrating the different sounds that it gets. That here, you know, you're boosting a range of frequencies, and here you're cutting them. Okay. And then this one is the graphic equalizer. So again, you get same kind of thing. Here I'm just boosting, cutting a given band. Now this is this particular one is again another bass equalizer. And so the frequency goes down to near the fundamentals of your bass strings, and it's a 1-octave equalizer. So the ratio between each of the sliders is 2 to 1. Okay. Now, we take this and we want to use something that is useful in a dynamic sense, and we get the wah pedal, right? The wah pedal can be simulated with, it's basically a parametric equalizer. Only it uses fixed Q and fixed bandwidth, and the center frequency is put in a foot pedal, so you can move it. Okay, so the more common wah pedal is the original Crybaby, and that had no controls. It was just you move the center frequency at a given Q and a given range of sweep. Some of the newer ones have variations. So this particular wah has 6 different push buttons that'll set different Q settings and different bandwidth settings that get different sounds. You probably have heard of wah. I mean, I know most of you guys play guitar, so you know. Hendrix used mulatto wah, and his Voodoo Child. That's kind of a rhythmic wah sound. One of my favorite effects was the talking wah, which is using a wah to make it sound like a person talking. Yankee Rose, Steve Vai does a good job of that, and then Hendrix did it on Still Raining, Still Dreaming. Kind of sounds like, you know, Charlie Brown's Teacher, you know, kind of thing. Yankee Rose is a really good example. In that case, it's actually, you know, David Lee Roth is carrying on the conversation with the guitar with the wah pedal. Again, you know, another great example. Sweet Child of Mine solo, just a nice classic wah example. And then my favorite is what I describe as the puking wah sound, which is instead of rhythmically doing it, just using it the wah for emphasis. You know, just kind of. And in this particular song, he's playing with the wah on all the time and just holding it in a fixed place to get a certain sound, and then rocking it forward to get that wah sound occasion. And in that case, he was closing it. And that's actually the variant of power wah which I brought in, which is the Morley. That unlike this common technique where they use, you know, what the Crybaby uses, where you've got a rack and a pinion here on the top, the Morley uses an optical thing. So I'll show you that later. It actually has a light bulb in it. And that light bulb is in the power indicator. That creates a light source, and then there's a big felt damper and a CDS cell on the far side of that damper. So it controls how much light gets to it, and changes the sound. And of course, Kirk Hammett uses a wah pedal like built onto his foot. You know, it's just everything. He's actually admitted that, you know, it's his crush. He has to use it. It's just, you know, part of his technique, and you know.